countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
By the pricking of my thumbs, something goofy this week. It's the last comic shop. I don't know, I was really trying to make it all creepy and spooky for the beginning of our October shows. I guess I failed miserably.
Yeah, but you replaced the bell with the weird creaky door sound effect, so that works. We're opening up the shop. Apparently this week we need to oil the door, but we're going to talk comic books to help everyone find their way underneath the comic book tent.
Yeah, and apparently that tent is haunted by monsters. We got monsters today of all sorts and kinds. And yeah, because that's what we do in October.
Yeah,
Monsters.
absolutely. People have been teasing this since, I don't know, Labor Day. People have started putting out their Halloween stuff.
No, the day after 4th of July, that 4th of July store becomes Spirit Halloween.
Oh, yeah.
I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson. I'm joined by Chad Smith and J.A. Scott, my two wonderfully spooky compatriots, as we take a look at spooky books all through the month of October, as we traditionally do here at the Last Comic Shop. Really quickly, guys, I think I asked you this before. Do you have a particular favorite classic Halloween monster?
I always like Dracula.
Ooh.
Do you like the Bela
I
Lugosi?
like Bela Lugosi's Dracula. Was great. Christopher Lee's Dracula was great.
Was it Gary Oldman that was the Dracula?
I would have loved the Gary Oldman Dracula combined with Gary Oldman from The Fifth Element, combined with Gary Oldman from The Professional. You mix those three together and you've got one badass Dracula.
Wow, that is cool. My favorite is, of course, Bride of Frankenstein. Even more than the original Boris Karloff Frankenstein look. I really love that Bride of the Frankenstein with that hair. Whoever came up with that, kudos.
There you go. And so I guess I'll go Wolfman.
The original Lon Chaney Wolfman? Or did you like the Benicio del Toro?
I'm going to go with Warren Zevon. His hair is perfect.
All right. Well, if you're picking up on what I'm trying to lay down here, it is now time for an annual tradition here at the Last Comic Shop where we bombard you with Halloween facts and figures and cool trivia that you can pull out at your next Halloween party. It is time for Halloween trivia. Dun, dun, dun.
No Peanuts questions this time.
That's
I've been
right.
Promised.
No Charlie Brown questions this time. The Great Pumpkin will not make an appearance. But
Jay has a peanuts allergy. Makes him get all swollen and
lose is what
Ornery. I
happens.
believe ornery
Chad-
is what it makes me.
there you go.
Chad is 2 for 2 in the past 2 years with Halloween trivia, but hope springs eternal here on the Last Comic Shop. So I'm really pulling for J.A. to win around finally. So in any case, J.A., you are the challenger, so you get to pick first or second. What would you like, sir?
I will go second.
Ooh. Seeing how many he has to beat. Wise choice. Are you ready, Chad?
Oh,
for
yeah.
Your first question. Oh, and we're hitting you hard right from the start. What kind of chainsaw was used in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Was it the Lombard 4D, the Black & Decker LP 1000, the Poulon 245A, or the Barker H77? I mean, they're all random names, but...
So Barker's not a name I recognize, so we'll go B.
B, the Black & Decker LP 1000?
Yeah, why not? Who cares? I'm not going to get this.
That is incorrect. It was the Poulon 245A. The chainsaw that was used in this film had to have a piece of black tape covering the Poulon logo to avoid a possible lawsuit.
What? They didn't want their chainsaw?
They did not at that point.
They didn't think Massacre was great press?
Question number 2.
Massacred my chances asking me about a chainsaw brand.
Question number 2. In Bram Stoker's Dracula, which character is an inmate at the lunatic asylum overseen by Dr. John Seward? Is that Renfield, Lucy, Van Helsing, or Mina?
We'll go Mina.
That would be incorrect. That is Renfield. He was the one that originally went in Dracula, if you remember, to Transylvania and actually brought the coffin back with him on the boat. So you are 0 for 2 right now, Chad.
Great.
As we move into question number 3, what was the first city in the U.S. to plan an official Halloween celebration? Is that Leavenworth, Washington, Maysfield, Kentucky, Salem, Massachusetts, or Anoka, Minnesota?
Go Salem. They're all spooky out there.
That is incorrect.
Goodness, so it can't be Salem. That's too much of a layup. I'm
was-
loving the fact that you're 0 and 3, Bo.
The correct answer was Anoka, Minnesota. When the Anokans woke to find their cows roaming main streets, windows soaped, and outhouses tipped over, they decided that something had to be done, and so in 1920, a Halloween parade was scheduled, and afterwards hundreds of bags of popcorn, candy, and peanuts and other treats were given away to children who marched in the parade. By the 1930s, it was estimated that 20,000 spectators lined the streets to watch this annual event. So you're 0 for 3, Chad, but hope springs eternal. So maybe you will get question number 4. I feel this is a layup, so if you don't get it, shame on you. What actress made her film debut in the original Halloween movie? Was that
Jamie Lee Curtis. I know this
Yes! See, I told you it was a layup. Jamie Lee Curtis made her film debut in the 1978 slasher film Halloween. So there you go. See, you're on the board.
There we go.
Question number 5 as we round the bend here. Which ailment did people believe could be cured by pumpkins? Was that poison ivy, freckles, bee stings, or blindness?
I'm going to say bee stings, but they all sound dumb.
Bee sting is incorrect. It was freckles. Yes, years ago, people believed that pumpkins could cure not only freckles, but also snake bites, which wasn't included as one of the choices. Question number 6. Who wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow? Would that be Nathaniel Hawthorne, Edgar Allan Poe, Washington Irving, or H.P. Lovecraft?
This one I know. It's Washington Irving.
That is correct. Written while Washington Irving was living abroad in Birmingham, England, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow was first published in 1820. Question number 7. What supernatural creature in Latin American folklore is said to drink the blood of chickens and goats? Is that a banshee, a cerberus, a chupacabra, or the manicore?
The Chupacabra.
That is correct. The chupacabra is a legendary creature from folklore in parts of the Americas, with its first purported sightings in Puerto Rico. Its name comes from the animal's reported habit of attacking and drinking the blood of livestock, especially goats. You're 3 out of 7. Going into question number 8, what percentage of adults celebrate Halloween? Would that be 46%? 68%, 74%, or 82%?
The answer is the best percent. All the best adults celebrate Halloween, right?
There you go. Yeah, I'm going to go with the second one because there's lots of fuddy-duddies.
Okay, so you're saying 68%.
Yeah, they're all slutty nurses. And
That is correct. And now, I will say this is according to the National Retail Federation, who polled adults, and 68.5% of them said that they celebrate Halloween. But you still got it right. You're 4 for 8, rounding in to the last 2 questions here.
just ask the questions.
Question number 9. In what Halloween classic does Max Dennison accidentally resurrect 3 witches from the Salem witch trials? I have to give you this one. I'll give you a choice.
Focus.
Absolutely right. Hocus pocus, Max lights the black flame candle and inadvertently resurrects the Sanderson sisters, 3 witches who plot to suck the souls of all Salem's children, beginning with Max's sister, Danny. Is that a favorite of yours, Chad, around the old Smith household, or no?
Nope.
Nicole likes it quite a lot. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, we tried to show it to our 6-year-old last year. It did not go well.
Oh, I'm sorry for that. Question number 10. Let's see if you can finish 6 for 10 with, according to superstition, what will happen to you if you point at a grave? You'll see your own death, your finger will rot off, you'll be haunted forever, or you will die.
It's either death or haunting, death or haunting, death or haunting. I'm going to go death.
That is incorrect.
What do you mean? We all die. Everybody dies.
The correct answer is your finger will rot off. Just kind of
once
bizarre.
You're dead. 'Cause that's what happens to dead people.
Remember, Chad, everyone dies, but not everyone truly lives.
There we go.
All right, J.A., you saw Chad came in.
I don't know, but these questions are so rando.
What brand of screwdriver can you go screw yourself with? The answer is all of them. All of the screwdrivers. Stanley.
Okay. Are you ready for your 10 questions, Jay?
I am.
Now, again, you just have to get more than 5. So, well, here we're going to start you off with a movie-related one, given you're our movie buff here. How many Oscars was the movie Psycho nominated for? 0, 2, 4, or 7?
I'm going to go 0.
That is incorrect. 4. Psycho was nominated for Best Director, Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, and Best Actress in a Supporting Role. Question number 2, J.A. What monster is said to prey on children and women in labor?
Wait. I don't think children go into labor.
No. Yeah, so like
labor.
Children.
Okay,
on
children,
both children
comma.
and women in labor.
Right. Okay.
So
Oxford, comma, there doing some heavy lifting.
would it be the Og Banshee, the Snallygaster, the Pentagallon, or the Gladowakis?
The Snollygaster.
That is incorrect. The Pentagallon. The Pentagallon is a ghost from Southeast Asian folklore. It is a variation of the vampire myth, and the Pentagallon is said to be a detached female head capable of flying about on its own.
These are so rando.
Question number 3. What was the longest-running supernatural-themed sitcom of the 1960s and 70s? Was it The Addams Family, I Dream of Jeannie, The Munsters, or Bewitched?
I want to say... I'm going to go Addams Family, but if it's Munsters, I'm going to shoot myself in the head.
That is incorrect. I know for a fact Addams Family only went 2 seasons.
Bewitched had 2 Darren.
Yeah.
That takes time.
Chad is absolutely correct. Bewitched. Starring Elizabeth Montgomery as a witch who marries an ordinary mortal man and vows to lead a life of a typical suburban housewife, did last the longest. And you're right. It had 2 Darrens.
2 Darrens. Well, there you go.
All right. Well, here's your gimme question, J.A. What Halloween comedy stars Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, and Harold Ramis?
Wait, you mean Ghostbusters?
It wasn't a trick question.
But it's not really I don't know if it's a Halloween comedy. Because it's not set during Halloween.
It's one that people watch a lot on Halloween.
Yes, of course, because it's a scary, funny movie. But it's not I don't know. Whatever. I'm not going to quibble.
You got the point.
Yes,
what are you
go
arguing
on.
about that as we move into question number 5? What was the world's first combination candy bar? The Goo Goo Cluster, the Abba Zaba, the Twix, or the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup?
I'm going to go with the Twix.
That is incorrect.
It was the Goo Goo Bar, the
It
Abba
was
Zaba.
the Goo Goo Cluster. In 1912, in a copper kennel at the Standard Candy Company in Nashville, Tennessee, the world's first ever combination candy bar was invented. It was a roundish mound of caramel, marshmallow nougat, freshly roasted peanuts, and milk chocolate, known as the Goo Goo Cluster.
Did you say it came out of a kennel? You're not allowed to feed chocolate to dogs? They're killing all these dogs.
Kennel, not kennel. In any case, as we move into question number 6, JA, oh boy, you have to get at least, 4 out of the next 5 to tie Chad, all of them to win. What dictator was sworn in to power on Halloween night? Would that be Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, Joseph Stalin, or Mao Zedong?
I'm going to go Mussolini.
That is correct! In 1922, on October 31st, Benito Mussolini became the youngest prime minister in Italian history after removing all of his political opposition through the secret police and outlawing labor strikes. Mussolini and his followers would then go on to consolidate power through a series of laws that transformed the nation into a one-party dictatorship. So there you go! Hope springs eternal. As we move into question number 7. Who wrote the score of the movie Halloween? Would that be John Williams, Danny Elfman, John Carpenter, or Rob Zombie?
I'm going to go John Carpenter.
Correct. One of the major reasons for the success of Halloween was its moody musical score, particularly the main theme, which consisted of a piano medley composed and performed by director John Carpenter. It took Carpenter 3 days to compose the entire score of the film.
He's just trying to save money. Let's be honest. I mean, it's great, but he was just trying to save money.
All right, let's make this interesting with question number 8, and we'll give you a gimme one. What was Dr. Frankenstein's first name? Would it be William, Abraham, Igor, or Victor?
I'm going to go Victor.
Yes, that is correct. Victor von Frankenstein was the title character of Mary Shelley's 1818 novel Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus. He's a scientist who, after studying chemical processes and decaying of living beings, gains insight into the creation of life and gives life to his own creature. Alive! Alive! All right, let's make this super interesting as we go into number 9. I want to keep this close. With question number 9, what was Anne Rice's debut novel? Was it The Shining, The Vampire Lestat, Blackwood Farm, or Interview with a Vampire?
Interview with the Vampire.
Correct. Published in 1976, Interview with a Vampire was based on a short story Rice wrote in 1968. We are now tied. Going into
all the marbles.
Final. This is for the win, J.A. And it is a film one. You are a film buff. So, in what horror film does news anchor Karen White transform into a werewolf during a live broadcast? Would that be Wolfen, The Howling, The Company of Wolves, or An American Werewolf in London?
I'm going to go with The Howling.
That is correct! Woohoo! The Howling. Karen resolves to warn the world about the existence of werewolves and surprises her employers by launching into her warning during a live television news broadcast. Then, to prove her story, she then transforms into a werewolf. She does it on purpose to prove that werewolves exist and that they should be killed. Kind of weird, but it doesn't matter because J.A. has finally won some Halloween trivia. Coming back, going 5 for 5 to beat Chad at 6-5 here.
Karen White, played by Dee Wallace.
Ooh.
Of E.T. fame.
There you go.
Definitely one of those that you would have rented in the pre-Blockbuster days.
We will be right back with more of The Last Comic Shop right after these commercial breaks, as we'll finally get to our comic book review, which is My Favorite Thing is Monsters, Volume 2.
Woo!
Hey, it's Mikey Wood, frequent Last Comic Shop guest and collector. And as a collector, I'm always in need of boards, bags, long boxes, and more to house all those comics. That's why I use promo code LCSPOD to get 10% off my orders at bcwsupplies.com. Not only does it get me a discount on BCW's already low prices, but I know using LCSPOD at checkout is another way I can show my support to the Last Comic Shop podcast and their continuing mission to bring fans together under that big comic book tent. So if you're in need of comic book supplies, head out to bcwsupplies.com and use promo code LCSPOD today. That's LCSPOD.
When you're done listening to this podcast, check out mine. My name is Dave, and I'm the host of Beer in Front. My podcast is just enjoying the beer that's in front of you. Sometimes we forget about a classic beer while we focus on the new trendy thing. What I try to do each week is to enjoy an old school classic or have a beer that has potential to be a classic. I'll also talk about events of the day. I'll add my spin to things. And each week there are people that really annoy me, and I'll call them out as the jag-off of the week. That's Beer in Front, available wherever you listen to podcasts.
And we are back now to talk not Halloween trivia, but a book. We're covering part 2 of My Favorite Thing is Monsters. If you want to know about part 1, we did cover that on a previous show. You can find it in our archives. One thing I wanted to bring up from that show, which kind of relates to this a bit, was when Emil Ferris was trying to originally get My Favorite Thing is Monsters published, she went through this publisher in China, sort of almost like a self-publishing route, and the publisher ran out of money, and the books, which were in a container vessel, got impounded for lack of payment through the Panama Canal. And to this day, we don't know where. I'm sure they probably just burned them up at some point, or they're in a warehouse somewhere originally. But after Fantagraphics picked it up and ended up publishing it, and it went on to great acclaim. So Fantagraphics then came back to publish part 2, and it was another hard road for Emil Ferris, this time not because a Chinese publisher ran out of money and the books got impounded, but she kept missing her publishing deadline. As an author, sometimes, especially for follow-ups, you can see that sometimes you've got a deadline when you're meant to turn over your manuscript to the publisher, and then you miss that deadline, and then it gets pushed, and then it gets pushed. So there was a little bit of tension between Fantagraphics and Emil Ferris, apparently.
And the one thing you left out was that Fantagraphics actually had to sue Emil Ferris because at one point she claimed that Fantagraphics didn't have publishing rights for the book. And so it was a long, messy process before they finally reached some agreements to finally get this out here.
And we have it to read just in time for Halloween. Chad, do you think you can give us like a 5 cents catch up on what happened in part 1?
No.
No?
I didn't reread that one. Let's see. The story itself, you have a young girl named Karen, and in the first one, her mom is sick and her brother is sleazy, and she believes she is a werewolf, and they wander about the town, and hilarity ensues.
What town do they wander about?
Is it Chicago? It's Chicago.
Yes, it is. It's Chicago.
It's all about Emil Ferris's ballpoint pen drawings. Like they go to art museums and you see ballpoint pen recreations of all the paintings, and then all of the old horror magazine style covers that are interspersed throughout. So that was part 1 for me.
Okay. That's a good sort of synopsis. It's a coming of age story of a young girl. She comes out, she's dealing with her burgeoning sexuality as a lesbian. Her mother is sick. It's set in the 60s, so 1968 in Chicago. So there's a lot of social tension going on with the Vietnam War and the election coming up. And so then that takes us to part 2. Andrew, what happens in part 2?
Well, the 10-cent synopsis, you guys are missing like a huge, at least MacGuffin that starts all of part 1, which is she has this neighbor, right?
Anka.
Who survived the Jewish Holocaust. She was a Jew in 1930s Germany. She was sent to a concentration camp. She had a really rough life prior to that. She was like a child prostitute, and all these other things happened to her. And so a lot of volume 1 tells the story of Anka's life and her death. That's the big thing that you get out of volume 1, which is Anka mysteriously disappears. She's shot, and Karen decides to investigate how this happened, like solve this whodunit, play Nancy Drew here. And a lot of the first volume is her trying to put the pieces together, listening to some recordings that Anka did about her time in Germany. And so basically these two stories are running on parallel tracks. Towards the end of the book, her mother does die, and that's where volume 2 picks up, is in the wake of her mother's death. Karen and her brother Dees are struggling a little bit, not only struggling with the death of their mother, but just struggling with this new reality that they're in. Like, you know, now it's just them. And Dees is looking out for Karen, but at the same time, Karen's coming of age. She's starting to remember that she had another brother named Victor who Dees killed. And so she's trying to figure out about that. She's also worried that, like, Dees killed Anka. And Dees is kind of a sleazeball character. He works for Mr. Gronin, who's like a mobster. Karen meeting a girlfriend. Karen trying to put more of the pieces together as to what's going on with the death of Anka, whether or not Dees killed his brother on purpose. There's this mysterious father that she's never met. There's these mob implications. There's this dude named the Brain. It's a lot of stuff. If I was to synopsisize volume 2, I think that's really what I'm going to say. It was a lot of stuff, and not all of it necessarily worked. I think that's where I'm going to start off with my initial thought, and I think J.A. might agree with me on this, that as much as I really love the art, and I think the art is still breathtaking and something that you can't see anywhere else, these ballpoint pen drawings, pretending like they're in a kid's notebook that's just a wonderful artist. I think in volume 2, some of the novelty of that particular artwork, even though it's still striking, to me just kind of wore off a little bit, and I found myself paying attention more to the plot. And as I did so, I found myself being let down. A lot of plot threads would just go nowhere. And then other ones would pick up, and then they would go for a little bit, and then they would just disappear into the ether. And so it was a little bit frustrating.
I was in a similar boat. I feel badly just because the primary burden here is on expectations, right? When the first volume of My Favorite Things Monsters was released, it was revelatory. Just the art was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Just the whole ballpoint pen aspect of it, the way it issued the traditional panel structure, the interplay between the museum pieces and the monster magazines, and then this murder mystery going on, you know, all interspersed with a coming of age story. It really did thread the needle quite a bit. And then in this volume, it was more of the same, but it was somehow lesser than the first one. And so I still think if you were to just pick this up and start looking at it for the first time, it is a tremendous accomplishment. I was reminded, just looking into her background a little bit here, about how Emil Ferris had West Nile virus and lost the use of her legs in the early 2000s and had to reteach herself how to draw. For someone to be able to have this talent in the first place, let alone after reteaching yourself, like, that part is super impressive. But at the same time, there are definitely pages in this go-round where it did feel like, oh, this was a lesser effort. And, you know, we've been waiting for so long.
Some of the pages felt rushed, and I wonder if that goes back to what we talked about, sort of the whole back and forth that was going on between Fantagraphics and Emil Ferris just to get this published, and missing deadlines, and then them having to sue. Probably harder to focus on one thing when you've got all that sort of the sausage making of actually getting a book made, as opposed to the artistic work of getting a book made. And I think some pages really suffer. Almost you would go from something that looked like it had taken a week to construct and draw to the next page or 2 pages looking like it had been done very quickly, maybe in a couple of hours. And I don't know if that was on purpose, but it felt like it wasn't on purpose. Like she had to finish telling the story, so they were sort of interspersed and thrown in. Because when she was putting this together, I'm sure that she didn't do it in a linear fashion. I'm sure there were certain pages that she had mapped out already, and certain images that she had taken a long time to draw. A lot of the artwork that she's recreating, obviously, and all of the Monster Magazine covers, but then some of the plot elements in between had a more rougher feel to it than they did in the part one. And there's a reason why part twos in books and part twos in movies are often hard to it's hard to really follow up sometimes that initial great artistic achievement. That's why you don't see a lot of great sequels to come out in art,
right?
Because it's so hard, especially when it's an initial offering that has blown the world away. You have that sort of, as you said, Chad, the expectations laid upon you and the pressure to deliver on those expectations, especially when it's part two of a continuing storyline. So you're trying to end that story and draw it to a conclusion. And I felt, to Andrew's point, it meandered a lot. There were things that sort of started and stopped. It didn't feel as focused as part one. And halfway through, it was like we would go from, okay, we're going to get a little bit more of Anka's story, and then we're going to go in and talk about Dee's for a bit, and then we're going to move off of that, and we're going to talk about politics and the Vietnam War and hippies, and then we're going to talk about ladies of the night and the prostitutes. And they all sort of felt a bit like throwing spaghetti at a wall and hoping things stick more than a fleshed out, conceived, we're going from A to B to C to D story. That
was the most disappointing part of this volume 2 for me. Was, again, sometimes when people do something, it's monumental and it's groundbreaking, and there's like, oh, you got to put out a sequel. Sometimes a sequel was never planned, right? Like you'll find, oh, we're going to make Psycho 2 because Psycho 1 was so great, and it's sometimes a cash grab or whatever. But this was different. Volume 1 ended with a cliffhanger. There was definitely a story that was going to continue well after. And you could go back and listen to the tape. I think that was the hardest things about Volume 1 was I invested so much time and effort, and I got to the end and I was just like, wait a second. Like nothing was resolved. We didn't find out who killed Anka. We didn't find out anything. Like the story is still continuing. And so when I got to Volume 2, I'm like, yes, maybe we'll finally start to get some answers. And I guess there are some answers to some of those questions sprinkled in here. But boy, it's like a needle in a haystack. You really have to be paying attention to pull them out. And even when they are, you're just like, wait a second. That's what the secret tunnel was? Like, it was just frustrating. Did you have Volume 2 really mapped out when you wrote Volume 1? I don't know.
Well, is Volume 2 the end? Because I honestly didn't read it that way. I just assumed there was going to be a Volume 3.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this is the trilogy, or at least a play in 3 acts. And so we just got Act 2. Like, that's supposed to be the act where everything falls apart, right? And to a certain extent, some of it does, but it just didn't answer enough questions to set up a potential Volume 3 to be a capstone.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, is just that first volume, it came out of nowhere. This isn't a creator that we had heard of before. I believe this is her first work that was published. It was just so masterful. Was it a satisfying story unto itself? Maybe. It was a nice setup, and you forgave everything else because of the art. And then in here, whenever certain pages and certain panels were not done by a master, but by a mere mortal, heaven forbid, and you think about it, there's one person making this book with all these colors and everything else going on and dealing, like Jay was bringing up, with, the other side of publishing too, not just the artistic side. It really is an impressive accomplishment, underscored by the fact that it's not as impressive as the first time around. And if this is how it ends, it's definitely disappointing, just because the story itself never lived up to the promise that we got in that first book.
We've really focused in on sort of the story aspects of this part 2, where some of the plot pages, also the art, we felt was a little bit rougher, and I don't know if that was on purpose or not. Sometimes it felt like it was, but there are still some pages and panels that are absolutely jaw-droppingly gorgeous. Really wanted to see the picture of Dorian Gray redone, and she didn't quite. I was like, ugh. Because that's a great story. I mean, the painting that's hanging in the Chicago Museum from the movie, the only image in the Dorian Gray movie that's not in black and white is the painting shown in beautiful Technicolor. You can go see it on a YouTube clip if you want, if you don't want to watch the whole movie. Though I suggest you watch the whole movie because it's good. But still, some just absolutely jaw-droppingly beautiful recreations of masterworks and the horror.
Oh yeah,
the horror covers,
those are still my favorite. Those are absolute my favorite. I would be paging through, trying to wade through the plot a little bit. I won't lie, but then I would be saved every couple of pages by one of those ghastly. Especially my favorite one I think is the Shiacore, where she makes a manicore, but it's like a female version. I thought that was just. I don't know. It was just an awesome image. I loved it so much. Another great little tidbit about her art that I really, really loved is I still love how she draws Anka. Even though Anka's not in this book as much as she was in Volume 1.
There's the Blue Lady.
Yes, yeah. She's drawn in that blue. But not only that, but she is genuinely ethereal or otherworldly, or she has a beauty to her that comes out in all of these pages, especially compared to some of the other characters. As one kind of knock against the art, and I'm not going to say because I love the art so much, but I did think that like every single time I saw Dee's, it seemed to be the same picture. Like the only time when Dee's in this book seemed dramatic or different than normal was that scene where he shakes down the one shopkeeper. I thought that was a really dramatic Dee's, but the rest of it is just that same profile shot of Dee's, like Dee's big head, Dee's yelling something slightly, and I was just like, for as much as she does with Anka and with Karen, I wish Dee's was treated better, I guess.
I did enjoy those scenes where she talked about all the different tells he has when he's lying. That sort of thing.
Take care. Cough, cough.
My question for you guys that I want to posit is this. Storytelling beats aside, if this came first, would you have been as excited? Because I still think there are things in here that, if this was your first exposure, certain panels, certain things are revelatory.
That's a good question. And it goes back to one thing I wanted to bring up because I don't have the first part in front of me. So maybe Andrew, I know you have it if you can pull it up. Is this one longer than part one? Is it about the same length?
I feel like the first one was pretty long.
Yeah, but this one felt really long. Like I felt like I was reading forever. Every so often I would say, I must be halfway through the book. And I'd be less than a third of the way through the book.
Yeah.
Honestly, Chad, again, I'm not going to say that Volume 2 doesn't have good images in it. For some reason, I feel Volume 1 was much more polished. There were many, many more examples in Volume 1. It was like boom, 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 boom. One great image after another great image after another great image.
I think the story was tighter, too. It was just a much tighter story.
Yeah, it was just a more polished effort.
It absolutely was. But this is one human. Like, one person created this. I'm in such a weird place because on one hand, yes, this is a disappointing follow-up, but it's still like really awesome. That's what I can't get around. Like the one person that can create these wonderful images may or may not be the best storyteller plot-wise, but if I were to see these, I feel like I'd be just as pumped for more. It's just sad that the trajectories go in a different direction. I'm hoping that there is a third chapter and that Emil Harris can find some of the magic that she had in the first one somewhere.
It's like we're struggling with the critic's curse.
We have no place to judge this, but
yeah,
we will. We're going to give it a rating and all the rest of it.
That's what. And speaking of ratings, we'll be right back after these commercial breaks with our rating. My favorite thing is Monsters Volume 2. So stay tuned.
Being a PI, you learn fast what seems like a normal case never is. You never realize how much you're going to need your friends. You can never guess how near your enemies are. And you never know who to trust. Now I'm chasing down an ancient artifact, the only thing that can stop this newly unearthed terror. It sounds crazy, but I'm not thinking how nuts it all is. All I can think about is the only man who's ever managed to grab my heart is right at the heart of this mystery. And why? Every time my heart gets involved in anything, there's always a monster waiting in the shadows to break it.
Ripped from the pages of the self-titled comic book comes Dash, a new queer supernatural noir podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Podcast Dash, on Instagram at dash.noir, or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for ratings, where we're hoping that these are more treats than tricks for Emil Ferris. Just a wonderful comic book talent. I know that we're being critics on this particular show. We haven't done anything as artistic as this in our lives. This is just a rinky-dink little podcast, so we appreciate her excellent efforts. But we read these books, and now we got to talk about them, so we're going to give it a rating. 1 out of 4 scale from J.A. J.A., what do you got for us this week?
We're going to go ghastly covers.
Ooh.
So in the first book, we did Bic pens, because that is one of the running themes through both volumes of My Favorite Thing is Monsters. And I'll start off by saying it's really hard to do a follow-up to something that is so explosively original and well-regarded. You're thinking, like, there's a reason why The Godfather Part 2 or Empire Strikes Back, are so great and considered so great, is because of what they followed and how they followed that.
Yeah, for every Godfather 2, there's a Caddyshack 2.
Yeah, so I think I gave the first one 3.75. You guys were both 4s. This one, it's a 3. The art is still very sublime, especially when she's recreating past masters with that big cross-hatching style that still has the ability to take your breath away. But the story is much more convoluted. It sort of meanders a bit more. It doesn't feel as tight. Threads are pulled on and then let go and not revisited. Almost like there's too many plates spinning and she's lost the handle on some of those sticks to keep the plates spinning, and things are crashing a bit. I'm really hoping that there is a third volume. The publishing schedule is a little bit more conducive to her artistic endeavor, because I think that has impacted this volume, sort of the need to replicate what she did in volume 1 and having that pressure of a massive winner or do it one better. That's a lot of pressure on one person. And again, she's just one person doing all of this. It's not a team. It's not like she can turn and rely on a writer or an artist or, to give her support on this. So it's still a masterful effort. I just don't think it rises to the level that volume 1 did. So it's a 3 for me.
Well, I'll go next, and as J.A. mentioned, I gave the original volume a 4, and it was a book that I sang the praises to pretty much everybody I met. I said, have you read My Favorite Thing is Monsters? If you haven't, you got to. I mean, this art is tremendous and something that you'll never see anywhere else. Just wonderful stuff. I'm going to go a little bit lower, 3.5 for me. Cuts down a whole half of a grade just simply because the plot was at times somewhat of a slog to get through. And I'm not going to just say that it's difficult to do sequels, right? I'm going to take that one step further, and I'm going to say that it's really hard to actually write an engaging mystery. The whole premise of this story is not so much, for me, the coming of age. Yeah, Karen's coming of age story is a part of that, but there's a lot of mystery aspects to it. And I feel like anytime you're writing a mystery, you have to have it really, really mapped out well in order to not only keep the audience guessing, but the ability to stick the landing. I mean, how many times have we seen folks since try to recreate what, Hitchcock did so wonderfully in a lot of his movies in terms of mystery or suspense or building of that tension, and just it turns out to be M. Night Shyamalan in the end, where you're like, oh, well, that was it? Oh, great. And that's what happened, I think, is you see some of the unraveling of the mystery and the points when you're supposed to be like, yeah, that was really great, or yeah, that was supposed to hit. We're finally supposed to find out what happened with Dees and Victor. Oh, we're supposed to finally find out a little bit more about Anka and who maybe killed her, and what was going on with Karen's dad, and this and that. And it just, some of it fell flat. I really wish that Emil Ferris had written volumes 1 and volumes 2 at the same time. With the amount of work she had to do and the creativity, maybe that would have killed her. I don't know. But I would liked her to have done the entire story all at once and maybe split it into 2 volumes and released them separately. I do feel like taking some time between volumes 1 and volume 2, I mean, we're talking about 7 years? I think some of the focus was lost. It's kind of like why Richard Donner did Superman and Superman 2 at the same time. It's good. You just keep going. I even think Godfather 1 and Godfather 2 were pretty much filmed very close together. So, maybe that's a winning combination for doing a story well, is just keep going.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to come down somewhere in between you guys, simply because I do still think the artwork at times is so masterful and so unique. But at the same time, it's the shadow cast by Volume 1. And I think Volume 1 got so many more of the important moments, whether it was that one page where we finally see what Karen looks like, whether it was, dealing with the mom and her disease and, that whole character. We had characters that were engaging and relatable and made you feel emotions, whereas in Volume 2, I don't know if I felt nearly as much. The empathy for these characters just wasn't there. And I don't know whether that was because of story beats or those pages that looked unfinished. Oh, you wish you could just give those back and say, all right, you've taken however long, take whatever other time you need to do this the right way. It's a dichotomy between the stuff that's done so well and the stuff that isn't fully baked. I'm going to go 3.25 just out of the respect I have for how impressive it is. Just how impressive those high notes are. And I'm going to forget the low points. And I'm sure I will by the time Volume 3 does come out, because it'll be another 6 or 7 or 10 years, at which time, I'll be super excited and happy to see it again.
She does have Pantheon Books acquired an upcoming prequel to My Favorite Thing is Monsters called Records of the Damned. So that will probably be the next one, but not out of Fantagraphics. Obviously, probably no love lost between those two parties. So she's gone to Pantheon Books for her next outing, which is when that will be out, I don't know. Probably 2026, maybe 2025.
I wouldn't set anything important by those standards. It'll be out when it's out.
Yes.
Yeah.
But hope springs eternal here at the Last Comic Shop. And one thing that we are all hoping is that you check out some of our recommendations. Yes, these are other books that you can pick up in addition to My Favorite Thing is Monsters Volumes 1 or 2 at your local comic book shop. I'm sure all of the awesome kitschy ones that have that street cred will have both volumes in stock for you to pick up. But in addition to those, here are some other things that you might like. And we're going to go ahead and start off with Jay Scott. So, Jay, what do you got for us this week?
I am recommending a book that was gifted to me at Christmas by Mr. Chad, and that is Manga Stories by Haruki Murakami, adapted into English by Jean-Christophe Devaney with illustrations by PMGL. And it's just wonderful. Wonderful manga stories that are lighthearted, are funny, lots of pathos. The first one involves a frog saving Tokyo from a giant worm that is going to cause an earthquake and relying on a bill collector. He's a bill collector. You know, he has great courage because he goes after all these people that owe money, and he's not afraid to ask them to pay for the money. And the frog says, I just need you to be my hype man. Well, I will fight the worm, but you be my hype man. Go, frog, go. And he keeps calling him Mr. Frog. He's like, no, I'm just Frog. But what about the worm? No, it's just worm. It's just, the art is dreamy and simple and cheerful. The stories are wonderful and absurd at the same time. And I think if you liked My Favorite Thing is Monsters, this will appeal to you as well. It has a certain quality to it.
Yeah, there's an artfulness to that one that is just, I knew it would be up your alley.
Delightful. It's delightful.
Don't sleep on Murakami's books as well. Things like Norwegian Wood or things I think about when I'm running or when I think about running. There's all kinds of great ones.
Kafka on the Shore.
Yeah, the Hard-Boiled Alice one, just wonderful. But yeah, I'll go next here. My recommendation it was a Comixology original by Scott Snyder and Francesco Francavilla that was published in physical form in, I want to say 2022, but it is called Night of the Ghoul. It had been a minute since I was able to see Francesco Francavilla on interiors, and so that was the big draw for me on this one. And what it is, this is a classic horror story. It goes back and forth between modern day, where a big-time movie buff is tracking down the director of one of the greatest horror stories that was never released because there was a fire before it could be released, and most of the tapes were lost or scattered or wherever. But it's about this film buff and his kid as they go to find that filmmaker, and they find him, but he's been locked away in a hospital of sorts by a secret society. But it intercuts that with scenes from the movie itself, The Night of the Ghoul, and that's a story of World War II. There's a platoon, and one of the guys in the platoon gets infected by the ghoul. And so it was a 3-issue physical series. You can find it in trade paperback. It is terrifying on all fronts. Francesco Francavilla is a modern master of horror. He knows how to play with blacks and oranges and just these haunting colors and visuals. And it really delivers. I don't want to give too much away. But yeah, if you were a fan of the old school monster movies, Night of the Ghoul by Scott Snyder and Francesco Francavilla is up your alley.
Well, there you go. I'm going to have to check that out because I like both of those folks, especially all of Scott Snyder's Comixology originals. I really think we should do Barnstormers at some point in 2025. I mean, we've been teasing it for the heck out of it. I just wanted to read some Tula Lotay art. But in any case, my recommendation doesn't have anything to do with Tula Lotay, but it does have to do with another famous comic book artist, and that's Jim Starlin. Going along with the Halloween season, what's more creepy and eerie than death? That's right. And so I'm going to finally recommend a book that I've had on my shelf for quite some time. It is the gallery edition of The Death of Captain Marvel. That's right. That famous graphic novel that was released in the early days of graphic novels at Marvel, telling the story about how Captain Marvel got cancer and basically passed away, and to this day is still a dead character, despite the fact that everybody in the Marvel universe comes back. They've kept the original Marvel. They've kept him in his.
Has he ever come back? He's one of those untouchables, right?
Yeah, he's pretty much an untouchable at this point, and for good reason, too, because as you'll read in this particular gallery edition, which not only includes the original graphic novel, but some other key issues from the original run of Captain Marvel, including his first 3 appearances in Marvel Superheroes 12 and 13, as well as Captain Marvel #1, where he meets Carol Danvers and so forth, as well as issue 34 of Captain Marvel. That's where he fights Nitro and gets exposed to this carcinogen that ultimately ends up taking his life. But the final chapter, Death of Captain Marvel, starts off with him and the rest of the folks from Titan going to get another famous Marvelite's corpse in the stone remains of Thanos, who died in, I think it's Marvel 2-in-1 Annual #2, I think. That's where he first originally dies fighting Adam Warlock at the end of their storyline together. But simply put, after that, you find out that Captain Marvel has cancer. And the reason why it's good that he remains as part of the dearly departed among Marvel is because this story is really about an acceptance of death. That death is a natural part of everybody's existence, and dealing with that fact gracefully and with honor and dignity. And the story has it in spades. So, yeah, I would highly recommend that you check it out, especially in this gallery edition, which is so much bigger. Nice and big-end pages for all of us old folks with really bad eyesight.
And I agree that death comes for us all, which is why the trivia question should have been correct. Should have been a tie.
Yes.
Will you just let J.A. have the W? Come on,
I kid. Congrats, J.A. Jeez Louise. All right.
Cue up that Peanuts music.
And you can check out the Peanuts. We reviewed the, it was like 1965 and 66 collections on our website, www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. We've got not only, again, past episodes featuring the Peanuts, we've also got past episodes like My Favorite Thing is Monsters Volume 1, plus a lot of other Halloween-related comic books that we've reviewed over the past 4 years. And we hope that you're going to be sticking around, because in 2 short weeks, we are going to have our 200th episode. That's right, a star-studded extravaganza where we'll bring back Mikey Wood and George from Shortbox Summary, Ethan Larson, Nicole, all of our favorite guest hosts coming back to read Watchmen with us to celebrate our 200th episode. We hope that you rate, review, and subscribe so you don't miss it.
You can also find us out there on the socials. We are at Last Comic Shop, where you can find Golden Age covers to put you to bed. You could find occasional polls or pictures of comic books being flipped through, or just general comic book-based discussion. And while we might be the Last Comic Shop podcast, we don't want to be the last comic shop, so we encourage all of you to get out there to your hipster dipstery shops, where you can find things like My Favorite Thing is Monsters, Volumes 1 and 2, or you could find things like that gallery edition featuring the death of Captain Marvel, a touching story. Haruki Murakami's manga stories. There are 2 volumes of that. I still have to pick up the second one. Or you could find Scott Snyder and Francesco Francavilla's Night of the Ghoul. All that more waits for you at your local comic shop, so check them out. And then circle back to our website, www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com, where they can find what, J.A.?
We always have links to our merch store. You can get coffee mugs, tote bags to carry around all the comic books that you're buying at the shop, be they books we just reviewed, or, you just want to pick up those Peach Momoko or Stanley Art Germ Lao variant covers. They will all fit in our totes, and being that is the Halloween season, we have our special Halloween-themed Last Comic Shop Podcast t-shirt. Bats in the Belfry, limited time. Let's buy it now. Looks good in gray heather. Everything looks good in gray heather.
Yeah, it does.
It does. Or even in that red,
that dark
blood red
maroon.
Oh, that looks great. That's the version I have.
The reason why you get it in blood red maroon is so if the vampire bites you, you can't see the blood. Easier to clean. And now you're a vampire.
You're going to live forever. You're going to want that
everywhere.
T-shirt to last.
Exactly.
We hope that you stick around for more Last Comic Shop in the upcoming weeks. Until then, I was the host with the most, Andy Larson. I was joined by Jay Scott and Chad Smith, and we hope that you stay safe, stay ghastly. Ooh, still some of the best parts of this entire book. Love those covers as a fan of creepy and eerie. And remember, if somebody tries to sell you a coffin, just tell them it's the last thing you'll need.
The Last Comic Shop podcast was a 2024 Black Angus production.